Aspiring for excellence requires that you have a clear vision of the mission you'd like to achieve. For the Michigan State Spartans, they haven't shied away from the national championship conversation. Can this senior class get the job done and lead this team to the ultimate mountaintop? Steve Gringle is an online columnist for MSUSpartans.com. He joined me on Thursday to break down everything relating to the green and white. So, Steve, first of all, we want to thank you for taking some time to talk Michigan State Spartans football with us this afternoon.
It's my pleasure.
So, obviously, Steve, the Spartans have lofty expectations in capturing a national championship this year. I'm wondering your thoughts on whether you think they have the capabilities to get that done.
Well, I do think they have the capabilities to get that done for a few reasons. They have a 3-year starting quarterback in Connor Cook, who knows that offense inside and out, has been extremely productive. And most of all, he's been a winner since kind of getting thrown into the fray in the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl 4 years ago. So I think that you start there, and then he's protected by one of the best offensive lines in the nation. 2 All-Americans potentially on that line, and Jack Allen at center and Jack Conklin at left tackle. And then on the other side of the ball, the defensive line is just as loaded, if not more so, with talent, starting with Shalik Calhoun at defensive end and Malik McDowell at tackle and Joel Heath inside and Lawrence Thomas on the other end, I think is going to be somebody that offenses are going to have to contend with. So I think because both lines are so strong, they have a veteran quarterback and a lot of depth all across the board. I think they're deserving of the top 5 ranking going into the Western Michigan game, and I think they can carry it through because that's kind of what they've done all 8 previous years under Mark Dantonio.
Now, when you talk about leadership and capturing a national title, obviously the quarterback plays a major role in accomplishing that goal. Now, Connor Cook wasn't named a captain, but he is a part of that 12-player leadership squad that Dantonio has established. So how would you look at Connor Cook's legacy during his time at Michigan State, and what would you constitute as a successful season for him individually?
Well, I think his legacy is one of a winner, that he's got 2, I guess you could say even 3 bowl wins under his belt, because he did play in that Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl and kind of was the spark that helped them get past TCU. And then, he won a Rose Bowl and he won a Cotton Bowl in dramatic fashion. I think he'll go down as maybe the quarterback in MSU history with the most ice water in his veins. I mean, he's a guy that nothing phases. He took that horrible hit against, was it Jacksonville State last year, where his knee was hyperextended backwards. I don't think anybody thought he was going to come back into the game. He came back and finished, never even let it faze him. So he's just a guy that I think he's coated with Teflon or something, because he just doesn't let anything get to him. Disappointment, bad passes, interceptions, they just roll off him. And I expect this situation with not being named captain a second year in a row, though disappointing, I think he'll use it to motivate himself and try to be the best leader he can be. And I think the guys will follow him. I don't think that's going to faze him one bit.
Now, the 2 hurdles on Michigan State's schedule from a national perspective are obviously Oregon and Ohio State. So I'm wondering your thoughts on how they'll fare in those games in particular and the rest of their schedule this year.
Well, Oregon's coming in with a new quarterback, and I think the difference in the game last year certainly was the quarterback play of, I'm drawing a blank here on the Oregon quarterback. He won the Heisman Trophy.
Marcus Mariota.
Marcus Mariota. Thank you. You know, too many names have gone through this brain over the years.
Yeah,
They
I
get
can
jumped.
understand. Absolutely.
But, you know, as good as Oregon was, Marcus Mariota, I think, lifted them to another level. And I think he was a big difference. And without him, I think, well, even with him, I thought Michigan State had, you know, they were in position to win that game. And things turned on one play. Should have been a big tackle for a loss. Instead, it was a big first down. And, you know, the Ducks don't have Mariota this year. So I like Michigan State's chances at home at night against Oregon. Going down to Ohio State, boy, it's, you know, it's really hard to pick against the Buckeyes. And they are loaded. They've got depth. They've got about 10 quarterbacks that could start for 10 teams across the country. Really, it's only 3, but they are just so stacked. So it's hard to pick against Ohio State at home. But, you know, as an employee of Michigan State University at msuspartans.com, I'm going to take the Spartans in that game, and I'm going to pick them to go all the way to the Big Ten championship game.
Well, that's lofty expectations, absolutely. Now, when you look at the changes they've made on defense, obviously Pat Narduzzi is out. So I'm wondering what you think the defense will look like under new leadership.
Well, I think it'll look much the same. I think they are. I mean, I think that's just kind of the pedigree that Narduzzi had brought to Michigan State when he came over with Mark Dantonio, who's also a defensive coordinator and defensive back coach by trade. So I think it's in their DNA to play the kind of defense they have the last 8 years under Narduzzi. Harlan Barnett's been at the right hand of the master in the press box for the last several seasons, and he'll be calling the plays. So I expect, you know, he'll be of a similar approach as Narduzzi was in terms of setting the defense. Mike Tressel is the other defensive coordinator, you know, and he's a firebrand. He's a get after it kind of guy. Might be the guy that replaces some of Narduzzi's fire, which I think everybody is looking to see how they do that. But also Mark Snyder, who came in from Texas A&M, is a high energy guy. I think he'll supply some of that fire. And Ron Burton, the defensive line coach, this guy is, you know, after he's done with football, he might have a job on the motivational circuit because he is a real fire and brimstone kind of guy.
Now, obviously, Jim Harbaugh is taking over at Michigan this year. So I'm wondering how you think the dynamics between Harbaugh and Dantonio will play out.
You mean on an interpersonal level, like going out to dinner and being friends and that kind of thing, or just coaching across the field from each other?
On the field and in the media and that sort of a thing.
You know, I think Dantonio is a guy who's always not let himself become bigger than the game. And I think he'll just look across the field at Harbaugh like he does any other coach. I don't think he'll give him any more due than he would give to Urban Meyer or any other coach in the Big Ten. And, you know, there'll be respect there. And as long as Harbaugh doesn't do anything to throw gas on the fire, so to speak, like Michigan's been known to do in recent years with tent stakes and things like that. You know, I think it'll be a cordial relationship. I think it'll be highly competitive. Everybody talks about Harbaugh's extreme competitiveness, but you know, I think Dantonio quietly is as competitive as a coach as there is in the nation. I think he's so competitive that he's developed this style that he's learned to win with, and he's devoted to sticking with, and may not look like, you know, he might not look like Vince Lombardi on the sidelines, but there's a very hot competitive flame burning within him, and he wants to win.
And when we talk about players that have to step up for Michigan State, what are three players that may be flying under the radar that have to have a big season for Michigan State to be successful?
Well, I think, I guess you could say they're flying under the radar, but it doesn't mean they're unknowns. On offense, I think Aaron Burbridge, the wide receiver, is a guy that has the potential, has shown flashes of greatness to be the next great wide receiver on this team. Michigan State's had a boatload of great wideouts over the years, as we all know. I've covered some of the best, Andre Rison and so on, Muhsin Muhammad. And I think Aaron Burbridge at 6'1", 2'8", can be that next guy. But everybody knows about him. And I think they all expect the same, expect him to rise just as I do and just about everybody who follows the team. Another guy on the other side of the ball who's kind of that ilk is defensive end David Thomas, who's played on some, he's played on offense some as a blocking back, H-back kind of position. Big body guy, really quick and athletic. He's going to take over that defensive end position vacated by Marcus Rush. And Marcus Rush is one of my all-time favorite players at MSU, just a blue-collar, overachieving kind of guy who did great things with what he had to work with. Well, I think David Thomas is going to be an upgrade at that position, as hard as that would be to follow in Marcus Rush's footsteps, because David Thomas is just a tremendous athlete. And, I think he's got an All-American potential. And out of the defensive backfield, I think Monte Nicholson is going to be a guy who may be the next great defensive back at Michigan State, kind of on the heels of Darqueze Dennard and Trey Waynes. So those are my three picks.
And when we look at Mark Dantonio as a master motivator, he's known for that. So I'm wondering your thoughts on his legacy as a Michigan State head coach. What tactics you think he's been using to motivate this year's team?
Well, I think his legacy is going to be when he leaves, and this season could cement it for him, because legacies are always cemented, right? Would be another Big Ten championship, getting into that title game and winning that, getting into the college football playoffs second season. If they could win a game there and get into the national championship game, I think he vaults right to the top with Duffy Daugherty and Biggie Munn as one of the three greatest coaches in Michigan State history. And if you look at his win totals and percentage and what the best of all time, but we'll save that argument for another day. The way he motivates is, I think what he's done is what he's done the best of all in terms of motivation and tradition at Michigan State is adhere to a philosophy that when Michigan State's been good, they've done it, the blue collar, overachieving kind of way. And finding the diamonds in the rough, developing the walk-ons, doing those kinds of things. And then sticking to a philosophy that if you aren't the best player, you're not necessarily going to play, no matter how many stars you have on your recruiting profile. And he's done it time and time again. I mean, walk-ons have started ahead of blue chip players and will continue to do so. I don't think there's any chance of that changing, and I think everybody knows that. And I think that serves as a great motivation for every player on the team. Plus, it gives the guys that maybe a lot of us don't think have a chance to play, it keeps them invested and motivated, because I think it's been proven at Michigan State that you can earn playing time with the way you perform.
And you recently also said that this is a good time for a program in the NFL. When you look at players like Kirk Cousins, who was then the starter in Washington, Trey Waynes is going to play in Minnesota. So I'm wondering your thoughts on the product that the university is putting into the next level.
Well, I think that's part and parcel to MSU's success under Dantonio. the ability to develop players who can go on to the next level is a major, major, major recruiting tool and advantage. Because now, I mean, they've done it with a lot of guys who were unheralded. You mentioned Kirk Cousins, certainly maybe the poster boy for that type of player, unheralded coming out of Holland, Michigan, and a guy that was developed under the Dantonio plan and now is starting for the Washington Redskins. But I think what's happened is that very highly ranked players in high school want to be developed too, and because they want to go to that next level, and so they want to play for a coach that can make them better and get them there. So I think the starting point on a lot of the recruits Michigan State is getting is much further ahead than it has been, and I think the pipeline to the NFL from Michigan State is wide, it's open, and it's going to continue to flow.
And finally, Steve, when we look at the overall season this year, what would you constitute as a success and failure for Michigan State?
Well, it's interesting because last year was considered, depending on how you want to word it, a successful failure for Michigan State. I don't think anybody would say an 11-win season that includes a victory over Baylor, which many thought deserved to be in the college football playoff, would not be considered a success. And the Spartans certainly didn't look at it that way, but they did consider it a disappointment because they didn't get to the Big Ten championship game. They didn't beat Ohio State. And they didn't get into the college football playoff. So I guess if you're a really hard grader, you would give them a fail if they don't get into that Big Ten championship game or don't get into the college football playoff. I think if they continue, certainly I think there are levels of success, and if they reach those highest goals, this will be an unmitigated success and one of the greatest accomplishments in program history. But I think if they stay in that 10 to 11 win realm of victories, I think it'll be considered a successful season. Again, disappointing if they don't get the championships they're gunning for. But I think as long as they stay in double-digit wins, it'll be considered successful, though maybe a little disappointing if they don't reach that ultimate goal.
Steve, we want to thank you for your time and talking MSU football with us this afternoon on the Two Man Advantage podcast.
My pleasure, Kevin.